Okay, so welcome to the latest in our Belbin webinar series. Today we're focusing on Belbin and recruitment, and I'm really pleased to introduce our panelists who each had successes in this area. So I'll go from left to right on my screen. So Dr. Elliot Street is an award-winning clinician and the co-founder and CEO of Inovus Medical. That's a multi-award-winning venture-backed designer and manufacturer of surgical training technologies headquartered in the UK. And as a global leader in its field, Inovus was founded in 2012 with a clear purpose to improve surgical care through connected training. Next, we have Mike Kerins. Mike is an entrepreneur who works in the life science research industry, and with a background in sales and marketing, he's gone on to start and lead several successful businesses and developing products and services that are used in pharmaceutical and academic research. He's currently the managing director at Cambridge Bioscience, which is one of the leading life science and research product distributors in the UK. And last but certainly not least, Bob Penney. Bob is an international business management consultant with over 35 years of experience in the biotechnology tools and medtech industries. And having set up 4 companies from scratch, he now runs McCarthy's Limited, a management consultancy focused on helping small to medium-sized companies to develop their leadership and operational teams. He is also a speaker, mentor, and assessor on the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme. Bob is an accredited Belbin Team Role facilitator, and he's used Belbin extensively over the last 20 years for team formation, development, and recruitment. I'm here from Belbin. My name is Victoria Brown, and I'm the head of research and development at Belbin. As I mentioned, unfortunately, our managing director, Joe Keeler, is not able to join us today, but I know she'll be disappointed because we've got a really great panel lined up to speak today about using Belbin in recruitment. So I'm going to ask Bob, please, to kick off our discussion around the ways that we can use Belbin in recruitment, and just to explain, if you can, as you go, our other panelists. So Bob, over to you.
Sure thing. Thanks ever so much, Vicky. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully that works, and hopefully people can see that okay.
Yeah. That's right.
Okay, so basically, when I started recruiting staff for the first of the 4 companies I set up, I found recruitment very hard because to me, the whole process seemed too subjective and resulted in me having... Hello? There's an echo there. So it basically seemed too subjective and resulted in too many assumptions being relied upon. And, you know, using assumptions and subjective assessments really for a key decision made me feel very uncomfortable. And yes, one of my top team roles is monitor evaluate. As a result of this, we set about trying to make a process that was much more objective in terms of measuring key capabilities, and more importantly, the can-do factor in candidates. And from this, we basically developed a structured process that was much more logical, and it evolved over time. But before I go into this, I think there's one thing I would say is that I'm taking this, and in fact, Elliot and Mike are taking this, from the perspective of a hiring manager, not an HR manager. And as a hiring manager, it's really important to say that it's solely your decision as to who you recruit and who you reject. You can get better at making these decisions by using tools and processes to help. But it's also key to remember that, you know, the candidates are real life people, and that you not only have a responsibility to the company and the team to make the right hiring decisions, but also to the candidates you're considering as you're potentially deciding on their future too. Okay, so what I'd like to do, just one more slide, is to briefly go through the logic on which both Elliot and Mike have basically base their recruitment processes. And the first and foremost thing is that as a manager, to be able to get to this position, you must have great job description for the position you're recruiting, as everything else, including success, hinges on the job description. Okay, so this big square represents the job or the position. Okay, and we're dividing it up into two criteria: eligibility of a person for the job, that's the experiences, skills and capabilities that are required, and these you can get through capability screening, CVs, and interviews. The other parameter is suitability of a person for the job. These are what's known in Belbin as preferred behaviours for the job. And these lead to the can-do factor. The higher you are in terms of suitability, the more can-do you've got in the job, basically. So you've got high and low on both scales. Obviously, you're not looking to hire somebody that is low and low. That's pretty logical. However, when you've got somebody that's highly suitable and but is low on eligibility, this is like an apprentice situation. Okay, loads of can-do factor. The behavior fits with the job. They just haven't got the experience. Now, in some companies, you can take these people on as apprentices and train them up. And if you treat them right and train them up, you basically can end up with somebody that's extremely loyal. The most logical place to look for somebody is somebody that's high and high. But unfortunately, you'd be wrong. These are the people that can do the job standing on their head with their arms crossed and their eyes shut. And basically, there's no challenge. So they end up in leaving the company in fairly short, time. I experienced this once to my, well, I wasn't upset, but I was disappointed. And the person was far too qualified for the job, and she left within 6 months. So I never look for people that are high and high. Now, people who are high in eligibility and low in suitability are, I have to say, you're at high risk of hiring people if you don't have some balance in terms of suitability. If you're only looking at eligibility, then you can find somebody that's highly experienced, skilled, capable, etc. But if they turn out to be low in suitability, they end up being the problem children of organization, sitting there saying, well, I told management that they shouldn't do this, but they never listened to me. They just moan, and they bring the rest of the team down. So they need to be ideally surgically removed from the job and placed in in another job where they are far more suitable. Okay. So where do I look? Well, I look for somebody that is greater than 50% eligible and greater than 75% suitable. Why is this? Well, the can-do factor can overcome, a lot of sort of barriers, hurdles, and get people keen to take on new experiences. But it's also important to understand that you need to have some personal growth room so that people can develop into the top right-hand corner. And when they get to the top right-hand corner, you can then either move them to a different job where they are less eligible but still suitable, or you can enlarge the square and give them more responsibility so that they are developing and progressing. And I have used this, and others, and Mike and Elliot have used this to end up with highly effective people enjoying their work. And that is absolutely key, because if you have somebody who's using their preferred behaviors, the Belbin behaviors in the job, you will find that they enjoy the job and they don't have to try too hard to actually succeed. Okay, and here's a summary of the reports that are used in this process. So a job profile report actually does a Belbin profile of the job. That's usually completed by the manager. The candidate does their Belbin report, and then you can compare the two together in the system to get a job suitability report for each person. Then you can actually put two people together to get a relationship report. And the first two people I always put together are the immediate manager and the candidate. How they work together, or how they potentially could work together, is quite key, but it also gives the manager an idea of how to manage the individual. And if there are other key people in the team that they need to get on with, then we also do relationship reports for them. And that basically is it. It is simple in terms of principles. And I think you've now heard enough from me, so I'll hand you back to Vicky for Mike and Elliot to share their stories.
Fantastic, thanks so much, Bob. So yeah, putting this now over to Elliot and to Mike. So I'll start with you, Elliot. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about how you were sort of handling recruitment before Belbin, and what kind of an impact has Belbin made on your recruitment process?
Yeah, but thanks, Vicky. So I think for us, we actually brought Belbin into our processes really early in building our business. It'll give you an idea of this. The business was very much the two co-founders for a long, long time. We really stretched ourselves to the point at which we started hiring team members. And we've sort of built the team ever since like that. So we kept the business relatively lean. But I was lucky enough to meet Bob as a member of the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme. Bob became my mentor, and he introduced this to me very early. So I think we'd only hired about 6 team members before we brought Belbin in, and they were relatively low risk hires. But where we brought Belbin in was as we were starting to build out some of our riskier parts of our business. So I'll just give it a little bit of a feel for the types of candidates that we hire. So we're a surgical training technology business. We are incredibly vertically integrated. So we have software engineers, product engineers developing hardware. We have operations teams, so we have a whole manufacturing facility in the UK, and the ops team running that. And then we have an entire commercial team, so direct commercial team of sales managers, marketing, creatives, etc. So before we started hiring anyone outside of basically operations, which was relatively low risk, and lots of manual and production-based roles, that's when we brought Belbin in. And what it allowed us to do is gain incredible clarity on the process that we wanted to follow, as Bob has really clearly defined there, suitability versus eligibility. It gave us great clarity of go or no go on candidates at various stages in the process, which I think is something that's really important. So you can meet a candidate on a first interview, a telephone interview, and you can almost get a feel by the end of the first half an hour of what their Belbin profile is going to be. And it really helps with that idea of, okay, I've got 50, 60 candidates here that I need to shortlist down to 3. I can use this as a tool to help me in an objective manner do that, because if I've got 50 of them all subjectively about the same standard, it's going to be really hard to do it. So yeah, I think I can't really comment, and I'm sure I might not be able to comment to this. I can't really comment to our process before that, because it's the first business that we've built and we hadn't done that much hiring without it. I think we're very lucky to have been able to bring it in so early, as we hear quite a lot that our processes are very good as a business, and I think Belbin is a key for that. So I'll pause there and probably hear from Mike, and I'll share some of other experiences later, I'm sure.
Fantastic, thanks so much, Elliot. And I think just to say before we carry on, because we've got a question to this effect, that we're obviously talking about using Belbin as a part of the whole picture, aren't we, in recruitment? So we're not suggesting that it takes the place of the interview, obviously the qualifications, which is what we at Belbin are talking about when we, as Bob says, when we talk about eligibility. We're talking about the qualifications and experience and things you find on a CV. So when we're talking suitability, just to recap on what Bob was saying, we're talking team role suitability, and it's really how we put those things together. So Mike, over to you. Could you share with us how you've incorporated Belbin into your processes and the effects that it's had?
Yeah, sure. So I've been running a couple of businesses over the last sort of 10 or so years. One throughout that period is a sales and marketing business, and the others are about 5 years established startup business. I came across Belbin actually having a discussion with a recruiter who, having vented some frustrations at some of the candidates or colleagues I'd hired of late through them, and some of the frustrations, he directed me. He basically teased me and said, "There's a guy called Bob Penney who's built much better teams than you have for a long time, and maybe you need to get in touch." So I did get in touch with Bob, and he introduced me to the Belbin system at that point, and that was about 6 years ago. Before getting on board with this, I really did have some serious challenges in the businesses I was working in, and I felt we had a pretty poor record of successfully hiring and retaining good people into roles, using an interview only process. Really, we were interviewing people, maybe setting them a few tasks to complete on when they came to visit us, but it was really focused on eligibility and no concept of suitability from the perspective that Belbin has brought us. And I think the consequence of those hires was then quite a high level of internal friction between individuals and different teams, that was frustrating and difficult to resolve, and didn't really have really didn't have a good sense of why this was going so wrong, when as individuals everyone was personable, and I took them on based on a good encounter through an interview, and then suddenly they changed. They came to the business and things changed, and it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And then got introduced to and discovered this system, and it's been a massive change for us. So the way that we use it is to profile. We, as Bob described, come up with a clear sense of what the job is about, set a good job description for the role that we're looking to hire into, and then once we start trying to recruit, we then pre-screen all of our every candidate that we're taking seriously. Before even a telephone interview, we'll submit a Belbin profile, and that is a prerequisite for us to do that. Occasionally, people have slipped through the net and not done one, and maybe talk about that. But everyone gets screened, and we do use it very much to filter it, like filter candidates, as Elliot described, to come up with a short list of people that we think are both eligible and suitable for the roles. And then we use it throughout the process from there on in. It's a really useful tool for us to use it. I think we use it to accelerate the kind of get to know you process through the interview. I think it's really good for an interviewer to have this profile of the individual in front of them, where you can ask questions like, you appear to be someone who likes to do the following, or, you know, how do you feel about work that involves, you know, I don't know, high level of attention to detail and you know, really finishing things out. And you know, these things never come across in any kind of application form or any kind of you know, CV. You can't gauge that, but if you know what the role involves and you can sense something about the individual from, you know, from answers they've given to this standardized questioning, then you can learn a lot from that. I do find that candidates enjoy getting the profile themselves, and regardless of whether they go forward or not, they you know, if they bother to fill it in, they're going to learn something about themselves, and you know, I think that's particularly true for younger recruits, that they genuinely enjoy getting that feedback from it. Yeah, so you know, carry on with that recruitment process. And Bob, you mentioned the relationship reports, and I think that's another dimension to it. When you're then, you know, you've got an individual, but they've got to work alongside others that are already in the business, and it is a good chemistry check to see that people are actually going to fit alongside of each other. And it's really useful in building out teams, I think, to be able to spot gaps and weaknesses in terms of the, you know, a good well-rounded team has a lot of the, you know, a lot of the skills around the wheel of, you know, I can see behind Vicky. You want all of those different elements to be available to a team, and sometimes we really sense that there's a weakness in the team, and we can, you know, we can deliberately try and plug that by bringing someone in who's, you know, more creative, or you know, a real doer rather than a thinker. And so that proves to be extremely helpful. We've had great outcomes with it. I would say my colleagues, whoever's doing the recruiting, I think within the companies we've got, it's a very easy and intuitive system to use. There is a jargon to it which you, I think, quite quickly become familiar with, and you know, we literally sort of sometimes introduce ourselves by our sort of Belbin profile identifiers, and I'm plant resource investigator and shaper, but you know, people quickly get it and get the language of it, and enjoy using it and find it very helpful for them. So yeah, it's widely adopted, greatly liked, and I think it's proven to be highly effective for us. We've definitely seen improved right hiring, getting the right people into the right role, better retention, more harmony within teams, and you know, I'd say that really does warrant the investment we make into the system. It really pays for itself many times over, because you know, I'm sure many of you have experienced the challenges that come along with making a hire that doesn't go well. You know, it's very detrimental, and this really helps us avoid those and make better hires. Recently, I've joined a new group. My businesses were acquired in earlier in 22. I've come into a new group, and we're not using the system, and I'm itching to get people on board with it and start using it. I'm working my way to getting that to happen, but it's intriguing to see how people work without it. Once you've used it, it becomes second nature, and you know, highly found it to be highly valuable. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike. That's great to hear. And I think the point that I'm sort of taking on board from both of you is that it isn't just about that sort of the point of hiring, it's really about asking those questions around retention, isn't it? It's ensuring that you have that fit and that you're able to support that. And we've touched on the working relationship reports, but also the team report as well, making sure that once you've got this person, that they're going to be able to fulfill these strengths that you've identified and they've identified. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I just wanted to talk a little bit about observers, because that's something that's coming up in the chat. And maybe, Bob, I know you've kindly spoken a little bit about this, but maybe I could ask you just to sort of share your experience with observers, because sometimes we say, don't we, that recruitment can be a difficult situation, which to ask for observers, because obviously it's generally observer assessments are from those that we've worked closely with, and it may be that colleagues in the individual's current role don't know that they're applying for other things. So how do you sort of handle the issue of observers with recruitment?
In a couple of ways, actually, Vicky. Firstly, what one as a manager has to think of is that when somebody does their self-perception inventory only without any observers, you could be getting a picture of a person in their reality. I think it was Philip Merry did an absolutely fantastic article about a lady in the Philippines or Singapore, which was entitled something like Dr. Meredith Belbin understands me more than my colleagues do, where the observers disagreed with the self-perception of the individual, and the observers were telling the truth. She was acting like that, but that wasn't her preferred behaviors. She wasn't displaying her preferred behaviors because her colleagues expected her to act and behave as they wanted her to do. And she basically complied. So there was sort of an up and down on her preferred behaviors versus her manageable behaviors. So self-perception does give the individual an opportunity to actually express themselves. Now, everybody also automatically thinks negatively and say, well, actually, with the observers, you validate the person's behavior. Yes and no, as per Philip Merry's example. Now, it is not impossible to get a candidate to do their observers or get observers in from colleagues they currently work with, because the individual is actually going to get the Belbin report and benefit from not only their self-perception report, but also their full report. And it's to help them as an individual and help their personal development. And I've advised candidates to say, well, look, just explain to them it's part of your personal development that you're wanting to do. Be honest and tell me what you think about, my behaviors through the Belbin profile. And that's worked every time. Okay.
And I guess the key thing is that it's a discussion that you're going to have, isn't it? So if you do have, you do decide to include observers and you have two elements of the profile that look very different, when you're speaking to that person in the recruitment process, I suppose you're going to be opening that discussion and saying there are differences here, and what do you think about what they've said? And as you say, Bob, it could be their opportunity to do something different or to move closer to what their own preferences might be.
Absolutely, I remember working in pharmacia in the UK in the late 80s, and one of my team roles, manageable team roles, was shaper, and one of my top team roles was team worker. When I went to Sweden, my top team role was shaper, and my manageable team role was team worker. And basically, I was working for 150% shaper in the UK, and I was suffering from, I think Meredith termed it, team role suppression. So Go figure.
Vicky, can I just add something to this? I think follows on from Bob's piece there about the observers, and also Mike mentioned it as well, and sort of how Mike practically uses this in interviews. And Mike, forgive me if I'm misquoting it, but it sounds like you go over the Belbin stuff and you sort of ask specific questions to sort of tease out the different types of preferred behaviours. Just hopefully this adds value to those listening, especially if they are a hiring manager. We do it slightly more surreptitiously, and then we do it more obviously. But what I mean by a more surreptitious approach is when we go into our final stage interviews, we know we've got the Belbin sitting there in front of us, and we will specifically ask questions and listen for the answer, knowing that it's highly likely that answer is going to give us a feel as to what their preferred behaviours are. But they don't know we're asking those questions. And so there's, I think, a couple of value adds on the Belbin list. First of all, you can actually use the Belbin as a barometer of how truthful the candidate is being. Because if they have done their Belbin, it's incredibly objective. And if they're giving you an answer which is just screaming that they are a plant, and actually on their Belbin, there is no plant anywhere near their preferred behaviours, and they give you another answer that is screaming that they're a completer finisher, but there is no completer finisher anywhere near their preferred behaviours, you can look at that and go, well, these things aren't adding up quite right here. So we're a little bit more surreptitious with some of the questioning as literally a barometer of truth. Now that you have to caveat that with sometimes that's not always super accurate, but sort of having been using the tool for 5 years now, it's astonishing how we can sit in an interview. You can hear the answer to a question which has got nothing to do with Belbin. You're listening to an answer and you're like, oh, yeah. And I'll often hear an answer to something, not thinking about listening for the Belbin profile, and I'll get the Belbin out and go, yeah, that's spot on. What they've said there is 100% their preferred team behavior. They're being very truthful, and actually that's a really good gauge instead of drilling down into it and saying, well, look, your Belbin here is telling us you're someone that's a completer finisher, that you like to get work done in a quiet environment, that you like to do it to a high standard, et cetera, et cetera. Tell me more about that. They're just going to tell you what you want to hear. Whereas if you're not doing that and you're subtle about it, I found it super powerful. And just while I'm on this, hopefully we've got time to touch on this, because I think this is important as well. One thing we have found, and there's lots of people from different countries here, that Belbin 100% translates internationally. That's the first thing. I think it's really important. We just built an entire commercial team in the US, and Belbin was central to that process. So that's number one. It translates internationally. Number two, I touched on this. We've got a very vertically integrated team, so lots and lots and lots of different skill sets, lots of profiles of individual. It translates universally across the business. And I think if anyone's sitting there thinking, you know what, I get it. I like the idea of Belbin for my commercial team or my sales team, but I don't want to shell out the cost for this part of the business. I would 100% counsel you not to do that, because it does add value across every type of hire you can possibly make. And I think that's just, hopefully anyone that's sitting there going, I'll use it for this part of the business, not that part of the business, I think you'll walk into trouble there. And from my experience, is incredibly powerful in terms of its translation globally, both from a geographical perspective and from a type of job role. So I just wanted to add that. Hopefully that adds some value to everyone.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Elliot, for sharing that. And I should just say, with my sort of R&D hat on, that we have obviously we have studies on Belbin across different cultures, and that's our finding, that it's a language that sort of transcends those cultural differences. So thanks so much. I just wanted to touch on, sorry, Bob, I just wanted to touch on job descriptions quickly, if I may, because I know that's something that, Bob, you could probably talk for quite a lot longer on, but we just had a few questions about that. So could we just clarify, because we're talking about describing teams in terms of Belbin team roles, and that's what our job report does essentially. So Bob, could you just touch on that and the differences that you've seen between, the typical job description and how we need to formulate a job description to work with Belbin?
Well, basically speaking, I would say that the process of formulating a job description is an essential one for the hiring manager to go through. All right, and then get somebody else to really double check and scrutinize the hiring manager with regards to what's written in the job description. I believe that a job description should be understandable by anybody. All right, they should be able to, anybody reading it should know what the key duties are, the key responsibilities, the authorities, and how performance will be measured. You can put in there experience, skills, qualifications, etc., but that's just that's not the job description. The job description is responsibilities, duties, authority, you know, so you convey an accurate picture to the candidates and to the rest of the organization what you as the hiring manager want to have as a, you know, want to fill as a role. Because if you can't convey that to everybody, you haven't really settled down and finalized the job description. Elliot is awesome at going to, well, he's a complete finisher, so he's awesome at defining the job descriptions, but it is something that is so key and so fundamental, because if you as the manager haven't got a clear perspective on the job, then you haven't got a hope in heck of advertising, conveying the meaning of the job to the candidates, and you won't be successful, and you certainly won't get be able to do a Belbin job report that fits basically with what's required. So I strongly recommend getting a good job description and getting others to critique it. Does that help?
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that answers that really well. Thanks so much, Bob. I'm just going to check for yeah, so a couple of people are asking, do we offer training? So we cover the job reports and the job suitability reports as part of the accreditation training. So yes, you certainly can follow up on that. Mike, I just wanted to come back to you, because you mentioned that you use the reports then as you sort of help to with the onboarding process essentially. And do you sort of use specific parts of the report, you know, specific questions, or is it more of a case of using, as you described it, the team role language as you're sort of settling that person into the team? How do you, someone had asked how you sort of go about making sure that you embed that hire, if you like?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's exactly what I said. I think we're certainly using we're using it in the recruitment phase. I mean, we do sort of sometimes have sort of workshops or discussions around changes in teams as we evolve, you know, as we develop teams and move them around and restructure and reshape them. I think.
Okay.
I think that's more where we
Right.
would use that. We quite often bring in sort of younger graduates into the business as a, you know, bring them into a certain area as a first role, but you know they're on a development program and we're looking to move them on in the business, and in that phase we very much would be referring to their Belbins to position them in the right place. But if I backtrack perhaps to some of the questions and comments about observers, I think when we're doing kind of screening, using it in kind of screening mode, we don't insist on observers. I think a lot of people find that quite difficult to get, you know, if they're applying for a job and they don't want to be public with that where they're currently working. They're, you know, it's difficult to get, I think it's harder to get a meaningful set of observers to contribute to their profile. So we're quite happy generally with a sort of self-perception report initially to help us with that. But once they become part of our team, then we certainly would use observers internally to then help them sort of you know, just solidify that profile and make sure that it looks like the individual we know and that they feel comfortable with it. Again, at the recruitment stage, one of the first things, we would always ask someone about their profile, whether they've got observers or not. How do you feel this represents you? Do you recognise yourself from this profile? Has it captured you? Is it who you see yourself as being? And that's and sometimes people say, well, I was surprised that I haven't got more. They usually say, I'm surprised I haven't got more team worker. And we kind of have to explain, well, the meaning of team worker in the context of Belbin is not necessarily, everyone wants to be a team worker, but you don't want to be a Belbin team worker necessarily in every scenario. So it's we get feedback from that. But in terms of once they're in the business, we do continue to use it. We do, we're moving people around, or we're trying to kind of understand the dynamics of a group, then we will revisit that, and we'll strengthen our profiles with Belbins. I think people often question, does my profile change over time? I'd be interested in your comments on that, Vicky, about to what extent do people's profiles evolve as they grow and as they become more experienced?
Yeah, so you can find an article in our resource library about this, but in our experience, you can find that preferred and manageable roles might shift around a bit, especially if people change job or as they sort of progress through their career. We don't tend to see it's not so common to see that things go straight from the bottom to the top of a profile and vice versa. But certainly you can see some changes as people sort of try out different things, and with team role knowledge you can sort of move into different roles and try different things. So I have there's so much going on in the chat, but I've got just about enough Shaper to realise that we're coming to the end of our time. I just wanted to finish on a quote from Bob from when we were chatting previously, Bob, and that you were talking about Belbin as a tool to help make better decisions, but the decision is yours to take. And that's essentially what we're talking about. We're putting another piece of the puzzle in, aren't we? And we're saying that this is something that can give you more information. It's not designed to supplant any part of the recruitment process that's in place. It's just having something else to go on, isn't it? So sorry, yeah.
I think, sorry to interrupt, Vicky, I think it's also important to emphasize, although we're doing this for Belbin, it's also important to emphasize that screening for key capabilities within the job is also absolutely key. And I know that both Mike and Elliot have their own methods and forms for screening capabilities, so that they don't rely just on CVs, because you can make too many assumptions from CVs, and people can always pad the CVs out to be something that's potentially a little bit more suited to the job, shall we say. But you need to be able to dig into the depths of somebody's capabilities as well as screen for the key ones.
Thanks so much. And yeah, I think that's a great note to finish on. So I just want to say thank you ever so much to all of our panelists for joining us, and thank you to everyone who's contributed to the chat. There's lots there that I'm sure we'll enjoy sort of going through afterwards. I'm afraid we do have to finish there, because we've asked our panelists for some of their valuable time. But I'm sure that I know that Bob's offered to sort of follow up on a couple of points. So obviously, if you do have any questions or you'd like clarification, you can always drop Belbin an email or get in touch with us, and we'd be really happy to help. But yeah, we hope you've enjoyed this webinar. We will be sending out a recording in the coming days. So yeah, thank you very much for attending, and hope to see you all at the next one. Thank you.
All right, cheers then. Thanks, bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.